Okay, let's go. So the parsha is parsha chukat, as we all know, and it's a difficult parsha because the concept of the para aduma is a difficult concept, and I'm certainly not going to try and understand it. But what I am going to try and understand is perhaps a little bit of background to it, and as we go through the parsha, maybe we'll understand a few things that we didn't understand before. The first thing is I'd like to do just for today is to go through a little bit of hakdama, an introduction from the Netziv on the parsha of para, because he says the following. He says that it's clear to him that the parsha of para and was the concept of the para aduma, this concept of having this heifer, this red cow that then you take, and then when you take its ashes and all the different processes that one goes through, and when you've taken those ashes, they then are sprinkled on the people, and the people become tahor, become pure. He says it's clear that that's already been said before. On a chronological level, the place of Parshat Paro is not correct here. Why? It says because when it spoke about the being matahar, purifying the Leviim, purifying the ones who now need to serve in the base of Mikdash in the profound way that they need to serve. So when it speaks about them, so what it speaks about, it says it says that you must put the meichatat on them. And if you got to put the meichatat is the waters of the para aduma, and so therefore he says it must have come before. And if that's the case, then it must be that it's written here in the Torah next to Parsha Korach for a specific reason, and he wants to understand what that reason is. Lama nichtava kan? Why is it here? He says we've said already that he says quotes from the Gemara at the end of Moed Katan, which says Lama nismacha Parsha Para lemitas Miriam. Why does the Parsha of Para come to the close to the death of Miriam the prophetess? To teach us in the same way as the para aduma is mechaper, it somehow has not only a purifying value, but it also has an atonement value, that the para does that. So too, when Miriam passed away, that was also mechaper, it also somehow atoned for Bnei Yisrael on certain averos that they may have done, whatever they may have been. I saw, just by the way, just talking about Miriam, doesn't really have anything to do with the para aduma, but I saw an unbelievable thing in the the Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim has got a book called Avat Chesed, and his sefer of Avat Chesed is all about the importance of the chesed that we do for others, and his specific focus is on halvaot, on lending money, and he's discussing who are the people that one is obligated to lend money to, and he speaks. He says that everybody, even if a person does certain aveiros, if they're doing it l'te'avon for the sake of their own physical desires or something like that, as opposed to what you call a hachis, which they're doing it in order to shtuch HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So a person is doing l'te'avon, so that you also have to lend them money. And then he says, however, a person, and this is quite controversial, but I just want to say, is a person who's Mechalel Shabbos, on purpose, like he specifically goes out of his way to be Mechalel Shabbos, such a person doesn't fall within the ambit of the people that you have to lend money to. And then he says something which is mind-boggling, and it's so mind-boggling because it puts something into our heads that really is a consciousness that we should have in mind. He said, and also malshinim, people who run around speaking Lashon Hora, because they've pulled them out themselves by the virtue of the fact that they speak Lashon Hora. They've pulled themselves out of the collective of the Jewish people. So therefore, they too are not worthy of getting the halvaot, of getting a loan, because a loan is all about brotherhood and achva and reyut and love amongst one another, and see if they don't get it. So that's linked into Miriam. The gravity of her speaking Lashon Hora. But anyway, she passes away, connected to Parshat Para. Why? Because there's some type of kapara that Miriam brings as well, in the same way as there's a kapara aspect, an atonement aspect to the paradum. Omnam, he says, indeed, however, Amru Od b'Midrash Rabbah. The Midrash also says that it's not only that. The reason is that there is a thing that the Torah we need to understand, that there has to be a specific, not only link between the parshas within the each sedra, but also the link between the ones that come before and ones that come after, especially when the chronological order is incorrect. But Inyan Kfar Bi'anu, he says, he explained it already in Parshat Korach. Why? Because Shaharan Ish, the 250 men of Parshat Korach, what was the whole problem with the 250 men? So there were many understandings of it and what they did, but the Netziv Shitta is singular. The Netziv Shitta is very simple, that what they were trying to do is that they were trying to sanctify themselves beyond the Gvulim, beyond the borders of the Torah. So if they're trying to sanctify themselves beyond the Gvulim, beyond the borders of the Torah, so then what happens is that when they come, when you try and go beyond that which is what the Torah presents, and that which is the parameters of the Torah, then what does it do? It does two things. Firstly, it's Harisa Satorah. It destroys the fabric of, the integrity of the fabric of the Torah. The Torah is like one big tapestry. If it's one big tapestry, if you just pull out one cord and you start unraveling the whole thing. So that's the one thing it does. But not only does it do that, but when it starts destroying the fabric of the Torah, then what it also does, it creates machlokes b'Yisrael. And that's a fundamental part. V'samuch inyan la esek para, and therefore connected to this concept of these great tzaddikim who try to extend themselves in kedusha beyond that which they were supposed to, comes the para aduma, says she'ena el tahara v'lo lekedusha, and this is such a fundamental part. What's the purpose of the para aduma? Explains the Netziv is letahara v'lo lekedusha. It's coming, there's not an aspect of kedusha in it, it's an aspect of tahara. It's not an aspect of sanctification, it's an aspect of purification. And once it becomes an aspect of purification, so then we have to go into the concept of purification. There are different types of how a person can become tahor. One of the ways that one becomes tahor is we call the concept of the Tvul Yom. Tvul Yom is a person who can go to the mikveh during the day, but they only become tahor when the sun sets. And also there are other aspects of people who are tameh and tahor. There's also this concept of the ma'orvei shemesh. Ma'orvei shemesh means that you can't even go during the day. You have to wait until the sun sets. So it comes along the Emek Davar, and he quotes from the Gemara in Yoma, which Barry, you'll remember, it's right at the beginning of Yoma. The Tzedukim didn't agree that for a person, in order for them to be able to be affected by the sprinkling of the waters of the paraduma, they were at full yom, which means they could have gone during the day into the mikveh. They could be sprinkled on the day, and when the sun sets, so then they become tired. The Tzedukim, there were these two. We know there were two. There's a period in time where there was a massive machlokes in the Jewish people between the Tzedukim and the Prushim. The Tzedukim didn't believe in the Torah Shabbal Peh, and so therefore they took everything at face value, where the Prushim did, and so that there was a time with the Tzedukim, they didn't agree with this concept of the Tvul Yom and for the Paraduma. And so therefore what they wanted to do is they wanted to make it the concept of Ma'arvei HaShemesh, those people who can only go after the sun sets. And the Chachamim were very, 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 very makpid on this, to make sure that this is not how it was happened. And so it says, what happens is that the Tzedukim managed to get their way, and they did it ba'orvei HaShemesh. What did they do? The Chachamim said that that mixture is pasul, and they threw the ashes on the ground, and that's quoted in the Tosefta in Paran. In other words, even though it was so precious and so important and so valuable and so special, nonetheless the Chachamim were extremely worried that this would cause would increase the machlokes in the Jewish people, and so therefore they said, because there's going to be machlokes, we'll just throw it on the ground. What's the machlokes? Machlokes is that if you would do it, if you would do it at the time that Tzedukim suggested, then all you're doing is you're saying the people that did it before didn't do it correctly, and there's this concept of moitzi laz ala rishonim, of in a way like pushing aside that which the original people had done. V'atam alaz eino masbik kol kach b'davar hazeh shelo na'aseh elel begedolim become a Shanim. He says, I don't understand why Moitzilat on the Rishonim is such a big thing. It happened once. It's not if it happens often, so then we can understand that you can say that the people before does everything wrong. But if it only happens once, what's the chap? Ella. He says there's another thing. And what is that time? He says it's a sweet, sweet, sweet understanding. And the reason is because the Ma'or Shemesh is about Kedusha and the Tfil Yom is about Tara. And you can't mix the two together. And that is exactly what the Tzedukim were trying to do. They were trying to bring one thing into another thing. V'zeh harisas halichas hadas. And this destroys the Torah. When you start mixing things together, if we are not able to define exactly what it is that we're trying to achieve in our Avodas Hashem, so then we start mixing things up. The minute we mix things up, then everything becomes an absolute mess. And says the Netziv, that is why the Chachamim took such a very, very strong stand against what had happened, because in our Torah has to be clearly defined. And we're finding it even in the world today, where people are saying, this is Torah and that is Torah, and this is what is, this is what isn't, but it's not correct. Torah is according to the Shulchan Aruch, so we have to follow the Shulchan Aruch in terms of what the space of halacha is. Everything else is hashkafa, which is not Torah, it's a hashkafa. And there are 70 parts in the Torah, there's 70 faces to the Torah. So therefore, there are 70 different ways in which we can manifest those halachic principles. However, we have to remember that those are the halachic principles and not the hashkafa. Hashkafa is not halacha. Hashkafa is halacha. In the same way as kedusha is kedusha and tara is tara, sanctity is sanctity, and purity is purity. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Please God. We'll continue again tomorrow.
Thank you so much. You look so cold.
No, I'm happy. It's awesome. The sun is lovely. God bless, guys.
Are you in a laptop?
No, my phone. On my phone.
Oh, amazing.
Wow.
Well, thank you.